I've told this story 100 times to friends, to family, to people I meet when I travel, and honestly, every time I get to the end of it, I still feel like it wasn't even real, like maybe it was something out of a movie. But it did happen, every second of it, and it's burned into my memory so deep that I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of that day, the smell of it, the way my heart kept slamming in my chest as if it was trying to break free. And yeah, when I tell people me and a buddy of mine once saved a tiger, most of them kind of laugh at first, like they think I'm making it up. But I swear to you, I lived this. I felt the heat on my skin. I heard the roar in my ears. And if you're willing to stick with me for a while, I'll tell you exactly how two regular guys ended up in the middle of the wild, face to face with a wounded tiger, and somehow made out alive while making sure that animal lived too. The place where it all happened. Well, I'll tell you this much. It's not on any tourist brochure, and it's not the kind of place you'd find yourself in unless you really wanted to disappear for a while. Let's call it Ranipur Valley, a stretch of dense forest and broken hills somewhere east of the mountains, somewhere far from cities, far from paved roads, the kind of place where people still cook over with fires and the nights are darker than ink. Ranipur had always been sort of a legend where I grew up. People said the forest was cursed, that it was haunted, that the animals there were bigger and meaner than anywhere else. I never believed much in curses, but I did believe in adventure, and I guess that's how it started. My friend Daniel, taller than me, stronger too, the kind of guy who could throw an axe all day without breaking a sweat. He and I had been talking for years about doing something different, something more than just our day jobs and our small-town routines. He worked construction. I worked odd jobs. Neither of us had much money, but we had time. And sometimes time is all you really need to get yourself into trouble. One night, sitting on the tailgate of his old truck, we started talking about Ranipur. The locals said the forest stretched for days, with rivers that cut deep gorges, caves filled with bats, and trees so thick that no sunlight hit the ground in some places. "Let's go there," Daniel said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. I laughed, because who just goes to a place like that? But the more we talked, the more it felt like maybe it wasn't such a crazy idea. We didn't have families depending on us. We weren't tied down, and honestly, I think both of us were restless, looking for something that would wake us up. So a month later, after scraping together some gear, nothing fancy, just tents, ropes, a couple of old rifles neither of us really knew how to use well, we set off in Daniel's truck. It took us 2 days just to get to the edge of Ranipur Valley, and by then the road had turned to dirt and then to rocks, and finally we were driving through dry riverbeds because there was no road at all. I can still remember the smell the first time I stepped out into that valley. Hot earth, damp leaves, a hint of smoke from some far-off village fire. The forest rose up in front of us like a wall, and even though I'd seen forests before, I swear I'd never seen trees that tall, that dense. Birds screeched from somewhere deep inside, and I remember Daniel grinning like a kid, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. We set up camp near a small clearing that first night, and I lay awake for hours listening to the noises. Something moved out there, branches snapping, growls low enough you felt them more than heard them. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to go deeper into the valley or run back to the safety of home. But we stayed, of course. We explored by day, hacking paths through vines, filling our water bottles in streams so cold it hurt our teeth. We saw monkeys, deer, once even a wild boar that tore through the underbrush like a bulldozer. But it was on the third day that everything changed. We were walking along the edge of a dry creek bed when we heard it. The faintest sound at first, like something dragging across the ground. Daniel froze, and I did too, because you don't survive in a place like that by ignoring sounds. We crouched low, listening. Then it came again, louder this time, followed by a low, guttural rumble that made every hair on my body stand up. A tiger. Now, I'd seen pictures of tigers, of course. I'd seen them on TV, behind glass at a zoo once when I was a kid. But hearing one in the wild, knowing there was nothing between me and it except a few thin trees, that's a different thing entirely. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like thunder given a voice. We moved slowly, inching toward the sound, and then we saw it. The tiger was lying half in the creek bed, half out, its massive body heaving with every breath. Its coat, orange striped black, more beautiful than I can describe, was matted with blood near its shoulder. I don't know if it had been shot, or caught in a trap, but the steel jaws of something mechanical clung tight around its front leg. A trap, rusted, ugly, human-made. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The animal looked both terrifying and helpless, its golden eyes flashing toward us. Lips curled back just enough to show those teeth. Daniel whispered, "Jesus Christ." I whispered back, "What do we do?" Neither of us had an answer. Because here's the thing. When you're standing 20 feet away from a wild tiger, everything you thought you knew about bravery and stupidity kind of blurs together. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me wanted to help. Both parts were screaming inside me at the same time. But then the tiger tried to move, and the trap clanged, and the sound it made, I can't even call a roar. It was something deeper, something that felt like it came out of the earth itself. Pain. Raw. Furious pain. And that decided it for me. I couldn't walk away from that. I turned to Daniel and said, "We have to get that thing off him." He looked at me like I was insane, and maybe I was, but he nodded, because that's the kind of friend he was. We approached slowly, every step measured, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The tiger's eyes tracked us, its chest rising and falling, its claws digging into the dirt as if warning us not to come closer. I'll spare you none of it. I was terrified. I could feel sweat pouring down my back, my mouth dry as sand. Daniel whispered, "If it jumps, we're dead." And I whispered back, "Then don't let it jump." The trap was old, probably set by poachers. 2 steel jaws clamped tight, with a chain buried into the ground. The tiger's leg was bleeding badly, but not so much that it looked fatal. Yet, the animal let out a sound, half snarl, half moan, and I swear for a second our eyes met. Not in some mystical way, not like in a storybook. Just me looking at it looking at me, both of us knowing what was at stake. Daniel pulled a length of rope from his pack, and I realized he meant to lasso the trap, pulled from a distance. Smart. We tried that first, looping the rope around the metal and pulling with all our strength. It didn't budge. The jaws were locked tight. "There's a lever," Daniel said, pointing to the side. "We have to get open by hand." By hand, which meant one of us had to get close enough to touch it. I don't know why I was the one who stepped forward. Maybe because I'd said we had to help. Maybe because I couldn't stand there and do nothing. Whatever the reason, I crouched low, moving closer inch by inch. The tiger growled deep and I froze. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely see straight. I reached the trap, fingers brushing cold steel. The lever was rusted solid. I pressed, pulled, nothing. Daniel moved beside me, both of us putting our weight on it, and slowly, so slowly, it began to give. The tiger roared then, a sound that shook the trees, but it didn't lunge. It didn't swipe. It just lay there, watching us, enduring. It took every ounce of strength we had, but finally the jaws snapped open with a clang, and the tiger's legs slipped free. Blood oozed from the wound, but the animal pulled back, staggering upright. For one terrifying second, I thought it would turn on us. It stood there, massive, trembling, its head low, eyes burning holes through us. And then it limped away, just like that, back into the forest, disappearing into the green, as if it had never been there. Daniel and I just sat there in the dirt, shaking, laughing and crying at the same time. We'd done it. Somehow, against all common sense, we'd freed a tiger. And that was only the beginning. We didn't follow the tiger right away. Honestly, we were too stunned, too exhausted, our muscles screaming from the effort, our minds still trying to process what had just happened. For a long time, we just sat there, listening to the forest breathe around us. Birds were silent now, and even the wind felt like it had stopped to watch. I could still feel the weight of those golden eyes on me, the raw power that animal barely contained by its own fear and pain. Daniel finally broke the silence. "We have to check if it's going to make it," he said. His voice was calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of worry. "If that leg gets infected, it won't survive." He was right, of course. Freeing it was one thing, but a tiger with a wounded leg is vulnerable. Vulnerable to predators, to starvation, and worse, to poachers. That thought sent a chill down my spine. I had grown up in small towns where you always heard stories about poachers, about the black market for exotic animals, and I knew just how ruthless those people could be. We couldn't just leave it there. We spent the night in the clearing, taking turns keeping watch. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made us jump. Sleep didn't come easy, but eventually exhaustion won. I remember dreaming about the tiger, its eyes following me, the trap clanging shut over and over, and waking up at the start, heart racing. The next morning, we decided to follow its trail. It wasn't easy. Tigers moved silently, and the forest was dense, tangled with roots and vines. We had to crawl under fallen trees, wade through streams, and constantly scan the surroundings for signs. Not just a tiger, but for any humans who might be there with ill intent. The thought of running into poachers made my stomach twist into knots. But we kept going. We found its tracks near a small riverbank. The prints were huge, unmistakable, and the blood from the wound was faintly visible on the ground. Daniel whistled softly. "That's it," he said. "We're on the right track." We followed the tiger for hours, sometimes seeing glimpses of it through the foliage, its stripes blending perfectly with the forest shadows. Every time we caught sight, my breath caught in my throat. It was majestic, terrifying, and fragile all at once. And each time, I felt a surge of hope and fear at the same moment. By late afternoon, we came across a small clearing where the tiger had stopped. It was lying down again, panting heavily. Its leg was swollen, and I could see deep abrasions that hadn't started healing. I knew we couldn't treat it ourselves. We weren't veterinarians. We weren't trained for this, but we had to do something. Daniel had an idea. He remembered an old ranger station, not too far from the valley's edge. It was abandoned, but he thought there might be supplies. If we can get some antiseptic, maybe some bandages, maybe even sedatives, he said, his voice trailing off. I nodded, knowing it was our best shot. The walk to the ranger station was grueling. The sun was dropping, casting long shadows across the valley, and every sound felt amplified. The creak of a branch, the splash of water, the distant cry of a monkey. At one point, a thunderstorm rolled in, turning the dirt paths into mud that sucked at our boots and made every step a battle. I slipped once, scraping my arm badly, and Daniel cursed under his breath as he helped me up. When we finally reached the ranger station, it was in worse shape than I remember from the old maps. Roof partially collapsed, walls crumbling, and the smell of mildew thick in the air. But inside, hidden under a pile of debris, we found a small stash of supplies, an old first aid kit, a few bottles of antiseptic, some ropes, and, thank God, an old tranquilizer gun. I hadn't even known they made these, but Daniel had a rough idea how to use it. It was risky, and if we messed up, we could hurt the tiger or ourselves, but we had no other choice. Night fell fast, and we had to move quickly to get back to the tiger before it wandered too far. Using the dim light of the lantern, we retraced our steps, my mind racing with every possible outcome. What if it attacked? What if we missed? What if poachers found it first? The anxiety was suffocating, but the thought of leaving it to suffer was worse. We found a tiger again near a rocky ridge, crouched low, alert and wary. It growled softly when it saw us, a warning we didn't ignore. Daniel carefully loaded the tranquilizer gun, and I whispered to the tiger, speaking softly, hoping it would sense we meant no harm. I'd read that animals can sometimes sense intention. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. The first shot missed. I felt my heart sink. The tiger bolted, limping but moving faster than I expected. We chased it through thick underbrush, slipping and sliding, dodging low-hanging branches. Every second felt like an eternity. I thought about giving up, thought about calling a lost cause, but Daniel's hand on my shoulder, firm and steady, kept me going. Finally, we got a clean shot. The tranquilizer hit, and within minutes the tiger's massive body started to wobble, then collapsed gently into the mud. I couldn't believe it. We were both shaking, adrenaline coursing, but relief washing over us. Carefully, we approached, keeping our movements slow and deliberate. Using the ropes and whatever ingenuity we could muster, we fashioned a splint around the tiger's leg. The wound was deep, and we cleaned it as best we could, applying antiseptic and covering it with torn cloth when we ran out of bandages. I held my breath the entire time, praying the animal wouldn't wake or lash out. Daniel kept talking to it in low tones, and somehow, amidst all the fear, it seemed to calm slightly. We stayed with the tiger all night, taking turns keeping watch and ensuring it was stable. I remember sitting there in the mud, looking at its enormous face, thinking about how rare and powerful and fragile life could be. This animal could crush us in seconds, yet here it was trusting. If not us exactly, then at least the fact that we weren't killing it. It was humbling in a way I can't describe. By morning, the tiger had regained a little strength. Its breathing was steadier, and it even tried to stand, wobbling but determined. We knew we couldn't stay much longer. The forest was dangerous, and our supplies were limited. We had to find a safer place, somewhere we could leave it until it could fully recover. Daniel suggested a secluded valley he'd scouted earlier, a place with water, shelter, and thick underbrush where poachers wouldn't easily find it. Transporting a tiger isn't easy. We had to improvise a stretcher from fallen branches in our backpacks, and even then, moving that massive weight through the forest felt impossible. But somehow, step by step, inch by inch, we managed. The tiger was heavy, but I swear, somehow, it seemed to sense our effort and stayed as still as it could. After hours that felt like days, we reached the hidden valley. We set the tiger down near a small stream, shaded by overhanging trees, and stepped back. It limped to the water, drank slowly, and then lay down, finally at rest. Daniel and I collapsed nearby, exhausted beyond words, dirt and blood and sweat covering us. And that's when I realized something. Saving the tiger had changed me, not just because of the adrenaline or the danger, but because it reminded me that life, human or animal, is fragile and precious, and sometimes the right thing to do isn't easy, it isn't safe, but it's worth every risk. We stayed another day, making sure it was stable, before heading back to our truck, leaving a trail of food and water for it. I looked back as we walked away, and for a fleeting moment, I could have sworn it looked back at us, almost in acknowledgement, almost in gratitude. When we finally returned home, we were silent for a long time, processing everything. No one believed the story at first. I even doubted it myself sometimes, like maybe it had all been a dream. But the memory is too vivid. The mud, the blood, the roaring, the smell of wet earth and fear and hope. Years have passed, and I've been back to the forest once or twice. I've never seen that tiger again, but I like to think it survived, that it roams somewhere free, stronger than ever. And Daniel and I, well, we're still friends, still talking about that crazy, impossible adventure, still shaking our heads at the fact that two ordinary guys actually saved a tiger. People ask me why I tell this story so often. Partly because it's unbelievable, partly because it's thrilling, but mostly because it matters. It matters that we tried, that we risked ourselves for something that couldn't fight back in words, but fought in spirit. And maybe, if you take anything away from this story, it's that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite fear, and sometimes that's enough to change a life. I'll never forget that day, that tiger, that forest. It changed me, Daniel, and I think it changed the way I see the world. Because life, wild and untamed, deserves respect, and sometimes it deserves our help too. And if we can step up, even just once, even in the face of fear and impossibility, maybe we can make a difference. I hope that someday someone will hear this story and remember it when it counts. I hope they'll see that courage isn't about guns or strength or luck. It's about heart. And maybe, just maybe, they'll do the same. Because that's what it's really about. The tiger, the forest, the fear, the struggle. They all taught me something. And that lesson stays with me every day. Don't look away when someone or something needs you. Step forward. Take the risk. Make the choice. And maybe in doing so, you'll save more than just a tiger. You might save a piece of yourself too.